All right, we have 5 marquee games this weekend that we're going to cover in depth. We will go in chronological order. So let's start at noon Eastern with Indiana at Ohio State. At BetMGM, Ohio State is a 20.5-point favorite, over under 66 and a half. First of all, Ohio State has dominated this matchup over the years. They've won 24 straight. They think they tied in 1990. The last time Indiana won, it was October 1988. The song, the song at the top of the charts at the time was "Don't Worry, Be Happy." Na, 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 that's how long ago it was. But this is a top 10 matchup. Ohio State is off of a bye. They did have their game at Maryland canceled because of Maryland COVID issues. Indiana is 4-0, but their 4 wins came against teams that have 3 total wins, and it's been a number of teams that they've been extremely disappointing. Penn State, while that win looks a lot worse than it did at the time. Michigan, well, we've seen what Michigan looks like. Michigan State and Rutgers. So, you know, it is 4-0. They are in the top 10, but the wins haven't been great. You know who has been great? It's Justin Fields. He has 11 touchdowns and 11 incompletions. No interceptions, 87% completion percentage. When kept clean in the pocket, he's 62 of 69 for 773 yards, 9 touchdowns, no picks, 96% adjusted completion percentage. I don't think this Indiana defense is slowing Ohio State down. I don't think anybody is slowing this Ohio State defense down, especially, Garrett Wilson's able to play any receiver spot. You basically need 3 elite corners to shut them down. I mean, just Fields is playing at another level. So I think that Ohio State's going to get their points. I don't think anyone would really argue that. So the handicap here, which I think is going to decide the total and whether or not Indiana can cover, is what can Penix do? Can he take advantage of this Ohio State secondary? Because I don't think Indiana's going to be able to run it. The Ohio State front, you have Togiai and Haskell Garrett. They've been dominating the line of scrimmage, and Indiana has not been great in run blocking. So I don't think they're going to get much on the ground. Where they could potentially take advantage of Ohio State is in the secondary. And Indiana has talented quarterback in Penix. They have talented receivers, Freifogel, Wap, Fillier, and tight end Peyton Hendershot. And is this Ohio State defense vulnerable is the question. They lost 3 pros from the secondary, lost their entire secondary. I mean, you lost 2 first-round corners, and you lost to Jordan Fuller, your single high safety. So this is going to come down to Sean Wade, who is moving to a new position. He was playing slot. Now he's on the outside. Sevyn Banks. You had the Cam Brown injury. You have some up and down play at safety. Marcus Hooker has not been great trying to fulfill that Jordan Fuller role. And Jordan Fuller never missed a tackle, and Marcus Hooker's missing a bunch. Their third corner spot, Tyreek Johnson's been a little shaky at times. So there were some breakdowns against Penn State and Rutgers. Josh Proctor many thought he was going to be that single high safety. He's kind of like the Swiss Army knife who comes in the box and does a lot of things for them. But this is a defense that Jeff Hafley, who's now at BC, came in. He's a Pete Carroll disciple indirectly, worked for the 49ers, runs a single high safety, cover 3 a lot, also some cover 1. And if you're not familiar with that scheme, the key is to take away the run game. So a lot of times you're going to have 8 men in the box, and you're going to have a single high safety to take away explosive plays. Remember how bad Ohio State was in giving up explosive plays a couple years ago? And then you need talented corners on the outside. They're mainly on islands, whether it's cover 3 or cover 1. Does Ohio State have those corners or the single high safety? I don't really know. It's definitely a vulnerable area. We saw this same thing back in 2017 when Indiana played Ohio State, and Ohio State was dealing with the loss of Marshawn Lattimore, Garyon Conley, Malik Hooker, again, 3 defensive backs that played in the NFL, and they absolutely shredded. Indiana shredded them that game. Even though Ohio State had a bunch of future pros, they were just very young and inexperienced. So can Indiana take advantage, in the intermediate routes, which is how you attack this cover 3, cover 1 defense. And then Ohio State hasn't been playing up a lot of press. I don't necessarily think they trust their corners yet. So can Indiana take advantage? In order to do so, I think they will need to have a clean pocket for Penix, and that could be an issue. Ohio State did lose Chase Young, but they're still getting some pressure. And if you get pressure on Penix, he's 71st in adjusted completion percentage when under pressure, 1 touchdown, 3 picks, 46 quarterback rating. In contrast, Fields leads the NCAA at 140 when under pressure, almost 100 points higher. And Indiana is outside the top 100 in pass blocking efficiency. So can Penix get enough time to take advantage of some potential weaknesses in the Ohio State secondary? I think that's where the handicap comes down to. Indiana certainly has the talent on the outside. And I think there are some holes in this Ohio State secondary, as you would expect early on after all the talent they left. So that's kind of how I'm looking at this game. What say you?
Yeah, and the thing is the point spread is exactly where we put it out at 20.5. So it's hard to make a decision. You know, if it goes down a little bit, then we would obviously favor Ohio State. If it goes up a little bit, we'd obviously maybe favor Indiana. But you're right. The Buckeyes secondary is the handicap in this game. Primarily their corners need to be under spotlight because they're the ones that have had the most problems between Sean Wade, Marcus Williamson, Sevin Banks. They have just 2 pass breakups on the season, and they've been targeted 28 times. I think to combat that, though, I went a little bit deeper and took a look at Michael Penix Jr.'s heat map of like where he's throwing and where he's the most successful.
Yeah, because just let me just interject real quick. Part of that is because they've been playing really off.
Yeah.
And coming into the year, their new D coordinator was like, we're going to play press, but they've been playing really off. So you can throw to them, and they're not there to break up these passes. But God.
Yeah, and I think the thing is if Michael Penix Jr. wants to attack the corners and he wants to throw out to the sideline, that's just not been his bread and butter, at least so far this year. His most success has come 20 yards down the field in between the hashes. So I'm not sure attacking corners is something that he's completely comfortable with doing, or at least he hasn't done it yet. So we'll see how that plays out, but that's really the handicap here. Ryan Day came out on Monday and gave his press conference and said, we've got to produce some pressure, period. Both defensive ends, Tyreek Smith, Jonathan Cooper, they have 7 hurries apiece. If you look at Indiana, Michael Penix Jr. is, he's been able to do whatever he wants. Penn State produced just 1 quarterback hurry. Michigan had 0 sacks. I think it's just going to be a different ball game this week with Ohio State's pressure. I think there's a focus on it. I think they're going to send blitzes when they can. But I think the front four is going to be able to get him rattled just a little bit because he obviously has not been all season long with the schedule that they have. And the schedule is what I don't know how I could back Indiana in this game. Indiana's beaten Penn State, Rutgers, Michigan State, and Michigan. If you look at those 4 teams and you take out the times that those 4 teams have played each other, the record on the season for those 4 teams is 1-13. So Indiana's beat a collective group of 4 teams that is 1-13. How much do I trust the Hoosier stats? Right? When they rank 110th in rushing success rate on offense, how much – are they really 110th or are they more like last against that group? The Hoosiers are top 10 in defensive havoc. How much do I put stock into that, from a tackles for loss and a pass breakup perspective, considering who they've gone up against? So, the defense has been great in finishing drives. They've only been allowing 2.4 points, past the 40 against opponents. But look at the opponents, and that's the hardest thing that I have with this Indiana team. I see them win these games. I love their record and the story, and then it's just like, well, now we're stepping up to heavyweight class here. You move from cruiserweight up to heavyweight class, and that really gives me a little bit of pause in backing Indiana. I completely agree with you. I don't see how Ohio State does not get their points. They're number 1 in the country in offensive success rate. I still have a little bit of heartburn about Master Teague and Trey Sermon, their breakaway speed and their explosiveness. But Indiana's 67th in defending explosive runs, so it's not like it's just not going to get exposed here in this game that Ohio State may have breakaway speed issues as far as the ground game is concerned. I think the way to beat Ohio State is Nebraska put up 200 yards, and they pushed them around in the trench. And that was really unexpected. You can call it the first game of the season. You can call it, breaking in new players on the defensive line. Nebraska put up 200 yards and controlled the trench. Indiana, like I said, 110th in rushing success rate. They're 80th in line yards. They can't replicate what Nebraska did. So instead of teetering, I think you should take a side on Ohio State, but I think the better bet really is taking Ohio State first half and taking their team total over. I can't see any way this Indiana defense stops Ohio State from getting theirs. It's a team that scored 51 last year in Bloomington, so I'm not sure what's going to change here.
Yeah, I don't hate that the team total. I don't hate the team total overcall, and yeah, it's difficult for me to really get a read on Indiana because who they played, and they have some troubling underlying metrics, even though they played a really easy schedule. But on the flip side, it's really difficult for me. I know this Ohio State offense is great, but it's really difficult for me to get a read on the Ohio State defense, which I did have questions about after the exodus of NFL talent. They've played teams who, look, Sean Clifford, he might get benched. And he had some success. Then they played Nebraska, who just changed their quarterback, and they were flip-flopping between Adrian Martinez and Luke McCaffrey. Another quarterback they faced was Noah Vedral. I mean, one of the worst offenses in college football. I will say, if the cover 3 single-eye safety with Hooker back there, and he's shown some vulnerabilities, that is one of the areas you can attack this defense if he's not up to stuff, because that's his main job, to take away up the seam, the posts. It's the Earl Thomas of the peak Legion of Doom Seattle Seahawks defenses. That was his job back there in the center field. So, yeah, there are some difficult things here because of the level of competition, but I agree. I think Ohio State should get theirs with these. Justin Fields is playing at an amazing level.